Hello, I'm Robert, fact checker and science blogger, and helping people scared of many things, in this case, nuclear weapons and nuclear war. And this time, it's about 2021, looks like being a very positive year for nuclear disarmament. With Biden as new president, then he has a history as a senator of being very strong on nuclear disarmament. And then the other factors in the rest of the world that are also of this nature that are going to bringing together to mean it's quite likely to be quite a lot of progress in 2021 and through his presidency. So he's going to stop the program of low-power nukes. He's going to rejoin the Iran deal. He's going to continue the bilateral New START treaty. I'm going to talk about all these things separately. So he's in favour of the comprehensive test ban treaty. The various things he's in favour of, even if he's not achieving it yet, that's the direction he's trying to move. And it's like a big time of increasing progress towards a nuclear-free world, with many of the other initiatives from other countries coming together at the same time, because we have the treaty to ban all nuclear weapons. That's going to come into force on the 22nd of January, just 2 days after his inauguration. The United States isn't obviously going to join that, but it's a very clear signal from 50 signatories that these countries think the world is safer without nuclear weapons. So you get the nuclear powers saying, we're making the world safe for everyone. You get the non-nuclear powers saying, we don't think you're making the world safer for us, please get rid of them. And that's quite a strong message that is coming up more and more. And then there's the review of the non-proliferation treaty, and that's that Sweden and 15 other countries want to strengthen that. And Biden's going to be urged to rejoin the Open Sky Treaty, which gives more openness and transparency between many different countries. So I'll just go through those. So I just mentioned them all quickly. Now I'll just go through them one by one. So with the Open Skies Treaty, then the United States withdrew from it under Trump. And if you look at it very kind of looking at America only, then America very likely can see pretty much anything it can see with the Open Skies Treaty with its satellites. So you can understand how it's looking at a very narrow kind of a way why the United States would think about withdrawing from it. They don't see an immediate benefit for themselves, not a huge one. So the Open Skies Treaty lets observation aircraft, unmanned aircraft equipped with sensors, to fly over anywhere over the country of concern with very short notice. It is all carefully checked that they're not doing anything nefarious. But that also involves collaboration between the two countries. Now, this brings greater trust with countries that don't have the vast satellite capabilities that the United States probably has. So allowing other countries to fly over the United States is a peace-inducing measure, because they can see that they can look at the United States, and then the United States can fly over Russia, NATO can fly over Russia, and then NATO weren't keen on withdrawing from it because they get a lot of benefit from being able to fly over Russia. So, and then Russia can fly over any of the other countries. And so it's, although satellites can provide the same and even more detailed, not all the treaty state parties have such capabilities, especially not the superb satellite capabilities the United States has. And so it's aimed at building confidence and familiarity among states party to the treaty to their participation in the overflights, and basically letting them see what you're doing so that they don't panic and overreact. So it does have its benefit in both directions. And the United States would benefit even if their satellites are very good. They can still supplement them with what they can see in a plane, which can see things that you can't see necessarily from the satellites. So Joe Biden in this case definitely wants to he didn't think Trump did the right thing to leave it, and he will be amongst what he's being urged to rejoin. He hasn't actually said, but I expect him to rejoin. The Iran deal, Biden is going to return, and Iran never really wanted to make a nuclear bomb. So it wants a nuclear-free Middle East, and so does Saudi Arabia. Not many people know that, but I've got this bit out of order. I've got another bit about the Iran deal. Maybe I forgot to put it in. Yes, if you go, renewal of the Iran deal. I've got it twice. I have to bring those two together. So yes, Iran is calling for nuclear disarmament. They're often wrongly presented as wanting to ramp up to nuclear weapons as fast as possible, That's not really where they are at all. They're just inching their way towards nuclear weapons in order to try and get the concessions, because they really want to. They really want to stay nuclear free, but they're nervous about Israel. So what Iran want to do, and they are one of the people, if you go and look here, then they actually voted in favour of the treaty to ban all nuclear weapons. So did Saudi Arabia. But they would like to be able to sign and ratify it. But their big problem is that Israel has got nukes, and Israel hasn't even disclosed its nukes, and it doesn't allow international inspectors to look at its nukes. And in that situation, Iran feels very insecure. So Iran wants Israel to, at least with nukes, to be declared and inspected, and then it wants to work towards a nuclear-free Middle East with whatever reassurances are needed. And then Saudi Arabia, they're not so worried about Israel, but Saudi Arabia are worried about Iran. And they think that for as long as Israel's got its nukes, then Iran may develop its nukes, and so Saudi Arabia won't be able to get its made to have nukes. And Saudi Arabia already have the capability probably to get nukes in 2 to 3 weeks or something, or a month or two, because they helped Pakistan to build their nukes. So Saudi Arabia can rapidly generate their nukes using the same exchange of knowledge or something from Pakistan. They seem to have quite a lot of confidence that they could have nukes within a few weeks if Iran was to say that they're starting to build a nuke. So, but Saudi Arabia don't want that. They want a nuclear-free Middle East too. So they voted in favour of the treaty to ban all nuclear weapons. Where is it? Treaty banning nuclear weapons. And then, so these are all the ones that have already ratified it, the green ones here. And there are now 50 countries. With 50 countries, it came into force, which means all those 50 countries are under the treaty. They can't make nuclear weapons. So Mexico, for instance, is never going to make a nuclear weapon, and it's committed to that. And then having and South Africa as well. I mean, they already were anyway, but I mean, they're committed in this treaty, and they're signatories of this treaty. And all those other countries in green, and so they're already committed. They're never going to make nukes. And they are also saying we want the rest of the world to not have nukes. We don't feel at all safe. We don't feel that nukes make the world safe. So please get rid of them. Find your way as quickly as possible to get rid of them. That's what they're saying. Very strong message. And that's basically what Iran and Saudi Arabia also have that point of view. But they just don't feel they can sign and ratify it until Israel's got rid of its nukes, because they're right on Iran's border, and then because Iran is so close to Saudi Arabia, they're traditional enemies of each other. So that's what's happening there. So he's going to renew the Iran deal. He's going to be doing what he can to get back to that as quickly as possible, I'm sure. He's supports the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So the United States actually doesn't need to test its nukes. It already knows how to. It's done all the testing it needs to do, and it hasn't done any tests since 1992. And that was first of all the Limited Test Ban Treaty, which stopped nukes in the atmosphere and the oceans, and then in 1992 was the last underground explosion. There were several of them from 1991 to 1992 in Operation Julian. And the United States, then we had the discussion of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. In advance of that, the United States stopped all its tests, but it has never ratified the treaty. So they're in that kind of limbo, that then they're not, and Trump even suggested he might do a new underground test. He never did, fortunately. And and Biden is very strongly in favour of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. He wants the US to ratify it. He gave a speech in favour of ratifying it, right back then, and he definitely will be trying to get the Senate to ratify it. Whether he'll succeed or not, there's certainly more momentum towards ratifying this treaty, which will make it much easier to eliminate nuclear weapons, much easier to stop proliferation of nuclear weapons. And there are many more countries that would need to be won over. But that's it's just step by step you get there. So there's a new start with Russia. I explained about that. I don't know how much I explained, but with a new start. So Russia wants it, and Trump was only willing to do a stronger agreement where China was involved as well. And China is only a small fraction of the nukes of Russia and the United States. And what's more, this New START agreement is very stringent in what it requires. China has a policy of not disclosing where its nukes are in order to have a very small number, about 200 or so. Same number as France, roughly, if I remember right. And the way it can manage to have so few nukes is by not disclosing where they are. And so they are not at all keen on the idea of joining New START and having to disclose to Russia and the United States where all their nukes are. So, because that's part of their policy, so that's a big sticking point. And then Russia and the United States have many more nukes than China have, so especially with them having 10 times more, whatever it is, nukes than they have, and also having disclosed all their nukes and disclose the planes that can carry them and things like that, where they actually are relying on not disclosing that for measure of security. And then China, they keep their nukes separate from their launchers, so they have this policy of not only no first use, they wouldn't use the nukes, and they wouldn't even be able to use them until after, if another country were to attack China, then China would then, after the attack was over, they would then be able to get their nukes and make them to the rockets and then fire them back. And they have this because it's just meant as a deterrent, because they don't think this is going to happen. They don't think anyone's going to attack China with nukes. So China has a lot of confidence that nobody's going to try to nuke them. So they haven't got this launch on warning or launch on or automatic launch if something lands in China. They just got a small deterrent compared with Russia. And so then that's the no first use thing. So, well, the US adopt a no first use policy for nuclear weapons. And it's quite hard to understand why they're so nervous about other countries when they're by far the most powerful military country in the entire world. And yet they seem to be very scared, and they think they could have the nukes in order to supplement their vast military power. And so the US has it has made it very clear to only use the nukes in the case of vital interests being threatened. But they haven't gone as far as Russia, which says it would only use its nukes if the integrity of Russia or something of that order is at stake. So that Russia feels outnumbered by NATO. NATO's got a much larger army than Russia has. And basically the reason that Russia has nukes is to counteract. It's very similar to the reason that Pakistan has nukes, because the Indian army is much larger than the Pakistan army. And India has battleground nukes. They would actually use nukes in battle to attack these invading soldiers if the entire Indian army was to try to invade Pakistan. So that's how Pakistan thinks about it. Russia has a rather similar approach, that if the entire NATO forces were to try and invade Russia, then they would use nukes. So so it's not that they want to use them, it's a deterrent to stop that. And so their whole idea behind that is that it wouldn't happen because of the nukes. But so they have a no first use policy, that they wouldn't use it unless they were actually attack themselves with nuclear weapons, or they had a massive invading force that they could not stop any other way. And that's the Russian policy. The Chinese just are very sort of almost laid back about it. They don't think anyone's going to attack them with nukes, so they just have a very small deterrent. So I'm sure they're a nuclear power and not to mess with them. Whereas the United States, then the United States just has a policy of calculated ambiguity. They won't disclose the situation in which they'd use nukes. And there have been many attempts to review that, and Biden wants it to be reviewed again. And just reviewing it again, even if it's maybe quite likely that they'll come to the same conclusion as before, that just getting another review just shows your intent and says, we want to do this when the time is right, even if they decide yet again that the time is not quite right yet. So I think that'd be quite a strong signal. But there's no situation in which there's no realistic situation in which the US is really going to use nukes first, because they bound by the four basic principles of the law of armed conflict. And whatever their secret playbook that they have, it would be consistent with this. And it's hard to think of a situation where only if you've got something like a nuclear attack and then they think about some retaliation. I personally think if you ever had a nuclear attack and then maybe whatever they did in 1 second, and in the first second if someone replied back, and then as soon as you got the video streaming around on YouTube and on internet and the people taking video of it coming down, of thing landing, all the horrific things that happened in Hiroshima, I think that at that very moment, then the launching countries, they would have just such an uproar of their own citizens saying, you've got to stop this. It's not humanly acceptable. And the only reason that nuclear weapons are accepted by the populations of these nuclear power nations is basically a kind of civilian contract with their own people that they're never going to use them. And I think if they ever did use them, then that contract would break down, and most people in the United Kingdom, the United States, or anywhere around the world, anyone with a bit of decency and humanity would be in totally in favour of the banning all nukes if they ever were used. So, and certainly it's against the four basic principles of the law of armed conduct to do anything that risks attacking large, unacceptably large casualties to civilians, not proportionate to the military aim, and so on. You can read the four principles, and so there isn't really, apart from very small battlefield nukes targeted at soldiers, which we don't have, with the nukes that especially the United States has, then it's hard to think of any situation where it could be not be a disproportionate risk of deaths to civilians. Maybe an attack on a very remote military outpost, but even then you've got the radioactive cloud. So it's hard to see any situation in which the United States, that their playbook for what to deal with that scenario could involve the first use of nukes, even though they do have that in principle. It's hard to see what kind of scenarios they really have that would involve using them. But anyway, so it's certainly very, very extreme scenarios if they did whatever they have. But so the actual changing their stated policy is not likely to make a huge difference really, because the scenarios, whatever they are not likely to arise anyway. But it would give more confidence to other countries if they can find their way to doing that. Then this would be, if they can have the confidence and find their way to doing that, then that would be a big step forward for the world, because they are the only large nuclear power left that doesn't have a no first use policy. And so Biden will be trying to move that way even if he doesn't get there. And so a new start, what else have I talked about? So the tension with Russia should be much less. The United States is going to be, under Biden presidency, the United States will be much more predictable. Moscow liked Trump because he's not so hard on internal Russian politics and things like that. But with Biden, then they're back to the familiar, what they're used to. And although they will be, they don't exactly like it, they know what they're dealing with. And I think that the experts are saying that will be a much more stable situation. Hang tough but keep talking is Biden's policy with he'll balance confrontation with engagement. He suggests a robust, clear-eyed approach in which Washington will be open to dialogue and cooperation with Russia where necessary, and it will be very much to the advantage of the wider international community for Washington and Moscow to develop a more functional working relationship. And then that's the example of arms control. So expect the chill in US-Russian relations to deepen under Biden, but don't rule out chances of them finding ways of pragmatically doing business with each other, where they judge it expedient to do so, and nuclear weapons is definitely a case in point. So they're hardly going to be best pals over this, but they see the mutual benefit, and this is, you can see Russia and Biden-led United States still working together towards the direction of increased nuclear disarmament. And so I think I've talked about just about everything here, and that's it. That's what's going to upload. Anything I've left out? So tensions should be less, even though the relations will be cooler. So Trump had a kind of more warm, friendly relation with Putin, but the tensions were quite high with him withdrawing from all these treaties and Russia, trying to get them to stay in them. Biden will have much cooler, frostier relations with Putin, but he will have a much more, probably a better business working relationship, and better progress towards nuclear disarmament. So that seems to be the situation. But it's not I don't mean Cold War frostiness, but just not, not best pals and sort of thing. And also I haven't mentioned North Korea. I haven't mentioned that in the debunk either. But Biden is going to build on what Trump did in North Korea. He's not someone to kind of demolish what Trump did. He recognises the progress that Trump did with North Korea. I think if you look back, North Korea would be Trump's great success. I think that would be his most success of all the things he did during his presidency, would be the way that he made progress in North Korea, where nobody had made that level of progress before. And Biden is going to build on that, but he's going to want it worked out beforehand, and that is where the North Korea lead very much from the top, and how much success Biden is going to have in dealing with a Confucian country where the underlings don't have that much authority, and things have to be decided person to person with Kim Jong-un. So we have to see where that progresses, but Biden is going to try to build on that, and he's going to be talking to the underlings, and then if it's another summit, then it's going to be on the basis of having worked out in advance the ground laws, and I think Kim Jong-un would be in some ways in favour of that, because with the last meeting with Trump, then Kim Jong-un travelled all that way by train. He doesn't like going by plane, and a very long I think it was multi-day and very long journey, and then when they met together, and then Trump just walked out of the deal, and Kim Jong-un had to go all the way back again, and again Biden will be much more predictable. So I mean, Trump sort of pulled out a big surprise on Kim Jong-un, perhaps hoping for capitulation and a much better deal, and Kim Jong-un wasn't going to give away all that in that period, in that short meeting, and so he went back home, and then they never met again, and that's basically what happened then. And I can imagine that after that experience, Kim Jong-un might in some extent welcome a more predictable president who does work out the ground rules before, even though he's not too keen. He much more prefers the person-to-person discussions. So we'll see what happens, but I think it doesn't look too bad for North Korea either. There was never any possibility of North Korea literally attacking the United States. That's symbolic, and they stopped short of being able to do that, of really being able to do that. That's not their aim. Their aim is to defend themselves. They're not interested in attacking anyone. They just want to make sure nobody attacks them. Much more. They're not like Iran that sponsors terrorism around the Middle East. They're not terrorism, whatever you call it, it's militants. To take a proper word for it. North Korea doesn't sponsor militants in other parts of the world, and not in the way Iran does. They're very much focused on their own little country in the mountains, and wanting to reunify with South Korea, and then wanting to be kept safe and keep everyone else out from invading their country. That's basically North Korea's perspective on the whole thing. And so I think that's probably the biggest unknown with Biden, but he is going to try to build on he's going to build on Trump and try and make progress forward to a deal with North Korea and South Korea. And Chairman, what's his name? What is this? President Moon. I can't remember what his appellation is, but Moon is going to is very keen on continuing the talks on reunification with North Korea, but slowly direction of peace with North Korea and collaboration industrially and industrial collaboration. The South Korea are very keen to finance North Korea and help bring them to the level of technology of South Korea. North Korea is basically third world apart from its military, and it's very low level of technology. For instance, farmers don't have tractors. They have a great shortage of fuel. So even if they have tractors, they're not going to be able to use them very often. They have power cuts over most of North Korea very frequently because of, again, running out of fuel and not being able to keep the power going. And South Korea are very keen because they were split by the Korean War, and South Korea, with their compatriots the other side of the border, and many families even divided, they are very keen to working towards eventual reunification, which is hard to imagine right now because there's such different systems of government, but to try and help their compatriots there and it also be of great economic benefit to South Korea. It's huge investment opportunities, and they're going to be investing vast amounts in North Korea to help North Korea if they can achieve a peace deal. So North Korea has a huge financial benefit from a peace deal. So does South Korea, but basically the United States needs to be involved there, and then they need to find some way of reassuring North Korea and making it clear that they don't need their nukes. And it may involve a nuclear-free entire Korea peninsula. The preliminary agreement that Trump made with North Korea wasn't just a nuclear-free North Korea, it's a nuclear-free entire Korean peninsula that they would work towards. So maybe Biden will also go along with that. That would be good if he does, because that would help to give North Korea some reassurance, even though it's kind of token, because of course the United States has its nuclear bombers on the island of Guam, and it has them in its ships. It doesn't disclose them when its ships dock, but to actually make a clear statement that the entire Korea is nuclear free would be quite a strong statement. Now, whether even the United States would do that, but the various experts have worked on various kind of forms of language that would be possible, that could manage to create something that is almost a nuclear free state that would maybe reassure both North Korea and South Korea, and yet keep the United States with its kind of ambiguity that it likes to keep on these matters. And it would probably be an agreement that doesn't actually involve the United States, but the United States doesn't stop it. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We could possibly see a nuclear-free Korea if this does work. So that'd be another thing to add. Did I show you all the nuclear-free zones? I haven't shown you the nuclear-free zones. I'll end with that. I think I forgot that. So these are all the ones that want to ban all nuclear weapons, that voted for it. These are all the green ones, the ones that actually have ratified banning all nuclear weapons. The yellow ones are weapons. The other ones are the ones that are signing and may eventually ratify. But then some of these you can see have abstained because although they voted for the treaty, they can't actually sign it yet. For instance, like because of Israel. And then these are the regions that are completely nuclear weapon free zones. So it's not too surprising that South America and Mexico are all voted in favour because they're in a nuclear weapon free zone. And So, and most of them are actually ratified as signatories. And you can see that just about the entire southern hemisphere is nuclear weapon free. I think the equator is the one sometime around there, that's the equator. In fact, I don't think there's anyone who's apart from in the sea. So there's this area of sea, and this one's north, that's the equator, isn't it? I don't think there's anyone south of the equator that has nukes. And although some ships, of course, will, some ships do, of course, sail around like that. So the sea is connected. Indeed, I wonder how you get nukes from there to there. Is the way through? Maybe if you magnify it. Let's look at magnifying it. Yes. How do the I think the various things where some of the various kind of levels of the nuclear free zones, and sometimes the United States just doesn't disclose that it's carrying nuclear weapons as it's travelling through some of the seas, and others are more stricter. It's quite complex patchwork. But yes, I was wondering, because you've got connected nuclear free zones all the way from Antarctica through like that, then how does the United States, how do the nuclear subs and if they want to go from there to there, how do they do it? Anyway, I don't know the answer to that, and maybe there's some kind of agreement where they can, some places they can go through. Anyway, and oh yes, I mean, I think, yes, I don't know. I'll have to look up details. I better not talk about it, because I mean, look at that. Quite a lot of the sea outside South America is in this blue zone, which is marked. Oh, sorry. Yes, by nuclear weapon free zones, to sea territory. So it says all that is sea territory right up to there. I didn't know that. So anyway, I'll find out about that for and update it or whatever, and find out what that's about. But yes. Anyway, but that's it. I mean, so are these large areas that are already nuclear weapon free, and it's not impossible. I mean, I do think that sometime, say, I'll close this and upload it. I think sometime in the distant future we're going to see a nuclear weapon free world. I don't see any reason why not. Eventually, although we seem to be from it now, but maybe towards the end of the 21st century, then we'll be nuclear weapon free, except for any situations where they're actually useful. And if they're actually needed, maybe keep a small stock of them and retain knowing how to do them, in case they're ever needed for something. But you don't really need them for deflecting asteroids either. You can deflect them with kinetic impact, and so anyway, we'll see. It would have to be a really exceptional situation to need a nuke for much of anything. Actually, you can make up scenarios, but they're not very realistic, where you'd have a situation which would involve a very large asteroid that needed to be, where the nuke was the best way to deal with it. It's not very realistic, because we know all the very big ones now. Anyway, so I'll upload this now.